Proceedings are resumed. Please be seated. I would like to ask if you guys can limit the amount of clapping in the second session. Members, if you wish to agree with something that a member has said, lightly tap on your desk. Not hard tapping, but a lightly tap. And in the audience, no clapping. None. Thanks.
Private members, motion number 2 of 2018, amendment to the Elections Law 2017 revision to mandate candidates to reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent. To be moved by the Leader of Opposition, the elected member for Georgetown Central.
I recognize the Leader of Opposition, the elected member for Georgetown Central.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move private members' motion number 2 of 2018, amendment to the Election Law 2017 revision to mandate candidates to reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent, which reads as follows. Whereas prior to the amendment of the election law on the 24th of October 2016, candidates contest an election in the election district, which was the 6th district of the Cayman Islands, namely the traditional district. Whereas it is not currently mandatory for candidates to reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent, and whereas there's a concern of a disconnect between constituents and their representatives regarding accessibility and lack of knowledge of the issue facing their community, and whereas there will be great awareness of motivation for the representatives to seek solutions to problems that arise in the respective community, and whereas there should be a requirement that candidates reside in the traditional district at least 4 years prior to the date of the next general election, which he or she wish to contest. Be it now further resolved that this Honourable Youth Parliament considers amending the Election Law 2017 revision to require candidates to reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent, and to mandate the minimum number of years for candidates to reside in that district must be 4 years prior to the next date of the next general election which he or she wishes to contest.
Private member's motion number 2 of 2018 has been duly moved. Is there a seconder to the motion? I recognize the elected member for Northside.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second private member's motion number 2 of 2018.
The motion has been duly moved and seconded. Does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Thank you for allowing me to speak in this honourable House once more. The motion I am presenting today and putting forward is one of highest importance. We, the opposition, believe that it's time for what we are representing and advocating to be acted upon by putting into the law as it deserves to be. Madam Speaker, it is unbelievable that the Cayman Islands has no current law which states that whether or not candidates must reside in their traditional district of which they wish to represent. This oversight must certainly fall under the government, who has sat idly by and did nothing about it, while complaints from constituents have fallen on deaf ears. Madam Speaker, we need to understand that our elderly Caymanian people are unique people who are set in their ways and have learned that trustworthiness is an important aspect of life. If they do not know who you are or whence you came from, or as they normally refer to, who your mama is, believe me, they're not going to give you the time of day, much less a vote. However, not only do the votes come from the elderly, but also from the young Caymanians who are registered, even if it's a few. Unfortunately, some of our young Caymanians are naive on the voting aspect because there is a lack of knowledge of what is being presented by the voters. The lack of knowledge will sometimes allow them to vote for anyone who posts themselves as a candidate without thinking about what they came with. When they vote for someone who lives elsewhere, who they know nothing about or not, it's being very naive towards them. I want the government to do what the opposition members have done and look outside the box. People live in a particular district for many reasons. Mostly it's because they have lived there all their lives and are comfortable living there among the people they know. Some people live in certain districts because it brings them closer to their workplace instead of driving a long distance 5 days a week to go out to work and from work. Some is because of family. There are a whole lot of reasons why people choose to live there. And while they have a choice of where they live, why not live in the district they wish to represent? I see nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I see all the right reasons why candidates should be living in the district they wish to represent for 4 years or more. Madam Speaker, young people are without a doubt the future of the Cayman Islands. But as evidence shows, like I stated earlier, there's a lack of registered voters in our young people. Have you ever sat down and asked yourself why? Many might just say that they're not interested. And yes, while that may be true, some of us, as you can see, are very interested. Many young people don't have any connections with their representatives. And as a result, they do not inspire to go out there and choose their leader. And why? Because they do not have enough faith for the representative, and there's a lack of trust. Candidates wishing to represent in the future elections need to be more involved with the young Caymanians on a one-to-one basis. How do they do this? Certainly, it cannot be done by living outside of the traditional district. The only way to encourage young to go out and register as a voter in the election is to live amongst them and to interact with them on an everyday basis. Madam Speaker, I leave the government with a quote from someone who once said, "From the outside looking in, you can never understand it. From the inside looking out, you can never explain it." Precisely the category a representative from the outside would fall into. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, I say, if the government chooses not to amend the election law, I guess it's because they're the one from the outside looking in and have an understanding of what the opposition is asking for. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, and members of this honorable House. I rise to make a contribution to the private member's motion, number 2 of 2018. If it is not broken, do not fix it. A term as old as time, is it not? I believe this term can be applied to the opposition's motion. The Cayman Islands Constitution, Order 2009, Section 61, already states the qualifications needed to run for election, including in regards to residency. Example, Section 61, 1C, states that he or she, at the date of his or her nomination for election, should be domiciled and resident in the Cayman Islands. And in addition, Section 61, 1D, also speaks to the issue of he or she being a qualified citizen. May I mention that for the last several decades, this House has operated on what the Constitution entails? I would like to ask the opposition if the case can truly be made to show that creating such a requirement as proposed would help representation to any significant degree. Considering that Cayman is very small and is a community where virtually everyone would know the individual standing in any district where they would elect or reject the individual. Good representation depends on the person who is elected doing their best to represent the people and carry out their wishes, which does not rely on the individual being resident in that district. In fact, it could be argued that someone elected in a district other than where he or she is resident might work harder to prove themselves worthy of the respect and trust of the voters who elected him or her. However, if the opposition strongly feels like such a law is required, as Attorney General of the government, may I suggest that the matter be put to a referendum? Such an important change in the law should not be considered without the benefit of the public's participation by way of a referendum. After all, the passage of a law in keeping with this motion would reverse decades of legislative and election practice that has always been accepted by the voting public, who ultimately judge who is elected, whether the person resides in the traditional district they wish to represent or not. Indeed, in 2012, a referendum was used to ask if the public would prefer to change the voting system from a multi-member constituency to a single-member constituency, also known as one man, one vote. Any change in the election law should be something that people are in favor of, not just the opposition. On the point of accessibility to one's representative is again a matter for the elected representative in any district, making themselves accessible to the people who elected them. With the modern means of communication, such as cell phones, email, multiple versions of social media, it is extremely easy to contact and receive communications from constituents. And the leader of the opposition mentioned that young people are the future of Cayman, and he's pushing this amendment forward because it would help the young people. But where are the young people often present? On social media, online, on their cell phones. In addition, the motion asking to reverse decades of election practice, it further suggests that a candidate should reside in the traditional district for at least 4 years prior to the date when he or she would wish to contest an election. This would automatically eliminate certain members presently serving in this parliament, with whom their constituents are fully satisfied. This could be seen as grossly unfair, personal, and selfish. In closing, I suggest that the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, which I have a copy of right here, adequately covers the issue of the necessary qualifications for an elected representative for this legislative assembly, allowing the freedom of others for the candidates running in an election, and the freedom of the voters to choose or reject a candidate irrespective of their district of residence. However, I would recommend to the movers of this somewhat reckless motion to make a major change such as proposed. They should consider a referendum, as this would show what the public wishes to do with such a motion. It is so important that we cannot have this motion put forward without the consent or opinion of the public known, as it was previously done in 2012 for one man, one vote. I thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to make this contribution to the motion.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. The request by the opposition is frankly outrageous to require candidates and elected members to reside in the traditional district in which they wish to represent. Madam Speaker, as shown by our model country, the United Kingdom, it is not necessary for candidates to live in the constituency in which they represent. The United Kingdom has a total of 650 constituencies. The rules of becoming a member of parliament are very simple. All that is required is that the candidate is a citizen of the United Kingdom or a Commonwealth country, 18 years or older, along with nomination by 10 other electors. It is that simple. However, the Cayman Islands is very small and only consists of 7 small districts in which there are 19 constituencies. Why is it necessary to further complicate the process of electing members in the small third world country as Cayman Islands? Madam Speaker, it is redundant to make it mandatory for candidates and elected members to reside in the district of intended representation when previously elected members were from the district of residence. It is simply not needed by the members of the public for the government to ensure their elected members have ties with their district. It is a no-brainer to know that the person who is always around in the district will be selected. It is a long shot to think that someone from East End can run in Georgetown and be elected over someone who has devoted years and years of service in that community. It is evidently impossible. Madam Speaker, in the United States of America, there are many members of Congress which live in their elected district, but there are those, however, who live hours away. The Cayman Islands is so small that it is evidently possible to commute from West Bay to East End in under 45 minutes. This simply shows that it doesn't matter where our elected members live because they can reach their elected districts within literally no time if they live outside of their elected districts. Additionally, the vast improvements in the world of communication now allows us to pick up a phone, dial a number, and within a matter of seconds, be connected to someone halfway around the world. The Cayman Islands is only 22 miles. The modern day advancements in technology and transportation will allow for a healthy relationship with members and their representatives. In the case that they don't live in their district. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, I would like to point out that the problems faced by one district are more often than not subjected to adjoining districts. The need for our members to be able to work in collaboration with each other is completely thwarted if it's thought that they are only responsible for their elected districts. This will create a country where the elected members of Georgetown may refuse to work with the elected members of West Bay to resolve common problems faced by their district. In order to be an efficient country, there has to be a certain level of unity between our members where they are willing to work to better the Cayman Islands as a whole versus their individual districts. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Northside.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of private member's motion number 2 of 2018 before the House that speaks to mandating candidates to reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent. Firstly, Madam Speaker, let me say, when persons make a decision to be a potential candidate in any upcoming elections, one of the very first decisions to be made is which district he or she would like to be a part of in order to represent a constituency. On that note, there should be no question in that regard, because, without a doubt, the district to be chosen should be one with which the candidate resides within, has much history of, whether it is being an advocate for many years as to community involvement on various issues or otherwise. Therefore, it should be mandatory that persons should be residing within the district they wish to represent for no less than 4 years. Madam Speaker, the realization is that there is a mindset within our Caymanian citizens which speaks for itself. This mindset reflects the image that if such persons who put themselves up as a candidate are not from that particular district, have not lived there for a vast number of years, or does not fit the profile of a prominent citizen, more than likely the voters are not going to give their vote to just anyone. What I'm trying to say, Madam Speaker, is that our Caymanian people do not believe in those who are referred to as Mr. Johnny Come Lately, whom they know nothing about. The fact is, Madam Speaker, persons wishing to be a candidate in any general elections ought to know their district inside and out, and it is imperative to have the personal contact with the people of that district. And let us not forget one important aspect which speaks volumes. More than likely, the people have built up the aspect of trustworthy, hence the reason the people would not hesitate and think twice about voting for someone whom they know they can trust and not have to be judgmental.
I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to claim point of elucidation or order, perhaps. You mentioned trustworthiness. May I state that there are candidates who have built up a trustworthy image in the community that they previously resided in, but decided to move, perhaps for a job of sorts, for economic reasons, for various other reasons. So, what about them? That's my question. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you for your input.
Do you wish to answer?
No.
Okay,
And let us not
proceed.
forget one important aspect which speaks volumes. More than likely, the people have built up the aspect of trustworthy. Hence the reason the people would not hesitate and think twice about voting for someone whom they know they can trust and not have to be judgmental or have to question the candidate's integrity. Madam Speaker, there are many who will argue that presently we have elected members living outside of the district which they are representing. And yes, while I do agree that this is the case, and is also the case in the Constitution Order 2009, does not reflect and directly speak to the number of years a potential candidate must be residing within a certain district. Still, it very clearly defines the number of years for persons to be a resident of the Cayman Islands if they wish to be an elected representative of the Cayman Islands legislature. In that vein, I will read what is reflected in the Constitution Order 2009 in Section 61, where it states, and I quote, "A person shall be qualified to be elected as a member of the Legislative Assembly if, and shall not be qualified to be so unless, he or she has resided in the Cayman Islands for a period of not less than 7 years immediately preceding the date of his or her nomination for election." Madam Speaker, that 7-year period most certainly gives any and all candidates ample time to move and live within the district they so desire to hereby be a representative for the people of that district. Madam Speaker, to determine the views of our Caymanian citizens, a sample survey was carried out within Grand Cayman. The results reveal that 70% of Caymanians believe the elections law should be amended, where candidates must live within their district 4 years preceding the date of their nomination for election. Madam Speaker, let me repeat, 70% believes the law should be amended. Further, 75% believes that the amendment of this law will have a positive effect on the Cayman Islands. So why not implement what Caymanians want? With that in mind, I therefore see no major issue to review and amend the elections law to advocate the 4-year period for candidates to reside in the district. Madam Speaker, with all that I have stated in presenting my argument to try and encourage the government to do the necessary and accept this motion, I am only left to think that there will still be many who will oppose to what we, the opposition, is putting forward. For the naysayers across the floor of this honorable House, my question is, would you vote for a candidate within your district if you do not have much knowledge of who he or she really is? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today I rise to contribute to private members' motion number 2 of 2018. The motion asks the government to consider bringing an amendment to the elections law so that it is mandated that anyone who wishes to sit in these honorable seats of this legislative assembly must, before they run, live within the district that they wish to represent. Madam Speaker, when you consider the reality of such an amendment to the law, it is not a good thing. If a potential candidate is living in a particular district, for example, because they wish to run in a district that they were born and grew up, then they are expected to move back to that district. That means they have to move their whole family, move their children to another school, unless they're in private school, and get another house. And Madam Speaker, this is 4 years before the general election. 4 years. You know how much can happen in 4 years? Most candidates do not even decide to contest an election about a year before the election. The opposition is expecting a person to make a decision 4 years, in fact, more than 4 years if you have to move houses. So, Madam Speaker, what happens if I don't win the election? Because you know it is a battle to get the opportunity to sit in this honorable house. I would have gone through a lot of expense to move to a particular district, and by the time I do all that, I'm not gonna have no money to run my campaign. The opposition may say that if I wish to represent my people, then I should be willing to do what it takes, but that's easier said than done. Madam Speaker, this requirement to reside in the district which you represent may have been a simple matter to mandate back in 1881 when the population was 3,066. It may have been easier to dictate where a candidate had to live. Then most of the population lived and married and stayed in their own districts, but not now when people move so often because of various reasons. In addition, Madam Speaker, if it was so important that an elected member live in a district that they represent, then why wasn't it mandated long ago? There were enough opportunities to do so. The first formal type of elected government was introduced back in 1831 when the representatives or vestrymen and magistrates from each district were either appointed or elected. The districts at that time were Georgetown, Prospect, South Sound, and West Bay. After that, the electoral system went through various changes until 1959 when the Cayman Islands was granted their first constitution and the Assembly of Vestry changed to the Legislative Assembly, and 12 members were elected. Those members represented the districts of West Bay, Georgetown, East End, Northside, Bottomtown, and the Sister Islands. It is acknowledged that during that time that the representatives did live in their districts, but that just happened to be so because they lived there, and not because they were required to do so. The next change to the Constitution came in August 1972. It made some significant changes, including the life of the Legislative Assembly, 4 years instead of 3, and there were no longer nominated members, only elected members. And there were to be 4 members to the Executive Council, which is now the Cabinet, instead of 2. But Madam Speaker, there was no mandate that an elected member had to live in the district that they wished to represent. In 2009, the Cayman Islands got another constitution, and again, there were major changes. This one included the Bill of Rights and started a process of changing the electoral districts from 6 to 19. Those members who were involved in the drafting of this constitution spent hundreds of hours working on it to make sure it benefited everyone in the Cayman Islands. Once again, there was no mandate that an elected member must live in a district that he or she represents. Madam Speaker, what the opposition members must keep in mind is that while the electoral process should take into account the people of the constituencies, it must not be so onerous of those persons who wish to represent those same people in those same constituencies. For those reasons, Madam Speaker, I cannot agree to the opposition motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Gavin Newsom once said, "We can build new housing while preserving the quality and character of adjacent residential districts and ensuring infill development strengthens the surrounding neighborhood." Today, I will be speaking on the people's views and opinions to this opposition motion to mandate candidates to reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent. This topic is very versatile and can go both ways. I am looking from the views of the general public and what they have indicated to me, both the positive and negative factors to this motion and what it has to bring. Madam Speaker, the Caymanians on both Cayman Brac and Grand Cayman have spoken. From my survey I have conducted, I have found out that, to get a general overview, out of 13 people I surveyed, a significant number of 10 people said, yes, a representative should live in the district he or she wished to represent. Most people said that it would help out because the candidates would know the concerns of the district, and this is a valid point the opposition is trying to get onto. But if you really think about it, most people in the Cayman Islands do already live in their district, putting more pressure on those who aren't a huge problem when mandating the situation. I think it should be their own option to where they want to reside due to the fact that their own opinion towards this place that they wish to represent, which will either lower their chance of getting in or increase it, again, dependent on the people. Madam Speaker, from my data, it has shown that most people would like to have a representative in the district, but again, most people said it should be given as an option whether they should reside there or not. At the end of the day, it is dependent on if the candidate is suitable for the position, whether he or she knows about the district is what it ultimately comes down to. For people not really knowing the different scenarios, this will create ultimate acceptance that yes, they should reside in the district, but that's just what seems best for the district and the country as a whole. Madam Speaker, one viewpoint is that someone who lives in the district would know about that district and what goes on and the problems facing that district. This point is very valid towards this motion, but again, say for instance, a person moves from a district, example, Georgetown, to live in Bottomtown. More than 4 years have passed and it comes to election time. The person wants to run for Georgetown, but instead has no choice but to run for Bordentown. Do you think this is fair for someone living in a district all their life, but just recently has to move? I think this example justifies two sides of the story in the positive impact. Although, yes, I do agree that someone who lives in that district will know what generally goes on in the district and will then be expected to answer to every problem that affects them. Madam Speaker, there can be also negative effects where a parliamentarian living in their constituency has a broad area to cover, due to the points that the issues can vary from people's own opinion towards this motion, as I said earlier. From my survey, it is clear that most people in the Cayman Islands that I surveyed did say a parliamentarian living in his or her district would be beneficial, but only to the point that it would help out the district and they would be informed of the issues facing the district. Out of 13 people, the reasons all stayed the same. It was the opposite for the people who opposed it. A parliamentarian who wishes to represent his or her district would have the adequate knowledge of the district, should have the adequate knowledge of the district, not necessarily live in it. Madam Speaker, from my research, there has been a negative factor that should be put into perspective and how it affects a lot of people in the district or districts around you. In whichever constituency I live, my vote should be by one similarly sized share of the total to be cast. My neighbor in another constituency should not have significantly more or less voting power in his area than I do in mine. Candidates will not only be making the decisions about whether to run as an independent candidate or which party or group they will run, but also which constituency within their district they are most likely to win. This negative effect to the motion is particularly to be true. While Caymanians have historically voted for multiple candidates in larger districts, they have been divided into polling areas which dictated where electors cast their votes. I've stated the people's opinions and views to this motion, and also the positive and negative facts affecting being that someone living in the district would know more about the district, to people not being able to run in a district of their choice due to their knowledge of the district or their personal connections to the district. Due to this motion being amended, this will not be possible and will give them no choice but to run for a district that they are not comfortable in or not able. Not saying everyone, but most likely the majority would want to venture out of the district they reside in to another district he or she feels more comfortable in. In the end, what matters is that your district is represented by the best way possible by the best person for that position. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Savannah.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to be here again. Amendment to the Election Law 2017 revision to mandate candidates to reside in the traditional district in which they wish to represent. If you are a victim of redistricting, then that's another matter, but that is not usually the case. Even in the USA, Madam Speaker, where politics is not so good, their constitution states that representatives should live in the same state. Madam Speaker, one would suppose that they meant same district, but most likely they would get a lawsuit or someone would scream about human rights. More often, it's more interest in representative political career than advocating on behalf of their electorate. This is becoming more about marketing, but it should be about true political representation. If you can't be bothered to live here, why should I be bothered to voting for you? And I would like to say, the government just said that this would be a disadvantage on the runners. But we have to keep in mind, they were saying that the struggle about the runners, but we have to keep in mind that It's about the citizen. It's about the people that live there. It's not about us. So I'll continue. Like I said, if you can't be bothered to live here, why should I be bothered voting for you? It make it more about the power, the seats, members, policies, rather than us, the people. When it rains in the district, voters want the representatives to get soaked too. And there's usual promises, Madam Speaker, like when I get elected, I'll open a boutique in the district, or I'll live in the area as soon as my son or daughter finishes law school. But by then, Versace is out of style. And then the child could be doing neurosurgery, which takes like 15 years. In 2010, the Cayman Islands Electorate and Boundaries Commission, speaking about their current single-member voting system, states, they provide a clear path to voter representation. The voter knows where he's supposed to go if there's a problem. Madam Speaker, but they will not be able to find them if they're parachuting into the district conveniently. Then phone goes unanswered. Madam Speaker, let it be said, when it comes to voting, I have to hold my nose. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize Honorable Deputy Premier.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I rise to offer my contribution to the private member motion Note 2 of 2018. Madam Speaker, the member from opposition engaged the plan to tackle and change the election law to maintain the candidates to retain the traditional district in which they wish to represent, an electoral district when the traditional and to maintain the minimum of 4 years to retain the period to the date of the next election which they wish to contest. Madam Speaker, the disagreement of the motion is simply minded to the point of view to any member, and to maintain the elector who tries to run for the traditional district must have the knowledge of the community and show the interest. That does not mean that the member needs to inhabit in the district. They need to have lived or had a property in that district and create a bond with the people living there, and be aware of the unspoken person to seek the solution for the problem areas. Madam Speaker, the law should be reduced not for 4 years, but at least 3 minimum, and take the consideration that Cayman is small and to create this type of amendment. In word of pride, I think ultimately what's important is that the candidate knows the people and knows the area that they're about to represent. Madam Speaker, Cayman has been successful during the period years. Elected members in different districts run for a district they don't inhabit. For example, they had a background living there, but they moved the whole family to move in that district and create a bond that allows you to run for the district. Must have the time to understand this whole motion. Madam Speaker, Cayman is in a short island, so it's not that hard to create a bond, plus to help the community. Just need to show the interest and be willing. 4 years is way too long. Let's leave that to sustainable islands or countries. Madam Speaker, during the past electors, we had some elected candidates at some point live in a district for years, still had the connection with the old district and helped the community, even though they had moved to a different district for a while, and yet they decided to run for the district they felt more comfortable because they had a family bond. Madam Speaker, we have some candidates of this House who had represent the district, start living there, but had the most important thing, a bond with the community. Example, an elected member from Georgetown served our country in the Party People Progressive Movement, PPM, from November 1992 to March 2017. He was the first elected member from the District of Georgetown, served the term in the LA, the Legislative Assembly of Cayman Island. His background is Cayman Black, lived his childhood, Georgetown, and at some point moved to the current district, Bordentown. During his term in the Legislative Assembly, he proved to be a good contributor representative, a team player, and elected leader. Madam Speaker, in my closing, I state to take the consideration to the community, look for the best interest for the new generation. We are successful. An old quote my mom always said, "He who feels it, knows it." In this motion, thus passed, we need to take some adjustment and consideration to allow the candidate to run to any district she or he had lived before, and to continue having a bond with the community. Also to reduce the years at least 3 minimum. Amendment this law will be decrease the amount of candidates. Anyone is free to move to a different district, make a bond, and help the community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for West Bay West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In regards to the private member motion number 2, to the amendment to Elections Law 2017 revision, based on what was discussed on both sides, I can agree 50-50 as to the direction the opposition would like to go into amending this law. My views are that for those who choose to run may not be favored by those in the district they choose to run in for. And this can raise a concern where some members of the public will not agree to candidates who are running to represent them. With this, I can understand their point, because how can you truly relate to a candidate that is running for you who doesn't really know you, even though they're not from the district that they choose to run from? With this, I would suggest that in future elections, and one moment, please, sorry. Madam Speaker, with this motion, there are ways that we can address the concerns of constituents who feel their representative is not true to what they stand for, or their people, depending on which district they choose to run for. For those who, for example, might be from West Bay that choose to run for the district of North Side, they could originally be based off of North Side, but in regards to convenience to live in the district of West Bay, this should not be a limited factor for them to say whether or not, for them to choose whether or not that they want to run for district. Because based off qualifications, their experience, and their education, they might be beneficial to the district they choose to run in for. For me, if we were to put this law in place, it would be a disadvantage to various districts that have a lack of numbers and people who are qualified to run for office and to sit in these memorable seats. That being said, I'm still 50-50 on this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I have before me the opposition's motion that's presented upon the House today. In the third whereas found within the motion presented upon this House, it states, "And whereas there is a concern of a disconnect between constituents and their representative regarding accessibility and lack of knowledge of these issues facing their community." To that, I ask the opposition specifically, what type of issues would be facing a representative of their constituency that could not be similarly addressed by someone who does not live directly within that constituency? As my colleague, the Minister of Transportation, said, that Cayman is a very small island. It is 22 miles, in fact. And to this I ask, what is the need of this entire proposal if we are to simply continue to divide Cayman further than it already is? What this motion presented upon this House would do today, in fact, would in a way result in factionalism between the different districts within the Cayman Islands. This is a very big problem I find within multiple systems, specifically because if we were to divide the Cayman Islands into the separate districts and force those from those districts to have to run in those districts, it would just lead to greater divide amongst a West Bayer, a Georgetowner, an East End, a person from East End, and someone from North Side. We cannot have that type of disunity within the Cayman Islands. We must recognize that someone from North Side, someone from East End, someone from Georgetown has just as much awareness of the problems facing the Cayman Islands as a whole as someone who lives in West Bay. We cannot simply say that, oh, since you live a couple of streets down, that you do not know what it's like to live in West Bay. And furthermore, the opposition's motion today can be clearly bypassed. Say, for instance, I was a resident of East End and I owned a home in West Bay. Under the opposition's current motion, that would legally read that I am both a resident of both districts, which therein would allow me to run for both districts. Yet, I might never have stepped foot inside my house in West Bay. I might have just owned it for another family friend, for instance. So therefore, this motion brought upon this House today cannot even fully serve their own method of what they're trying to execute, since it can easily be bypassed. Furthermore, as my other colleague has stated upon the modern communication methods found present within the Cayman Islands today, they do bring up the good point, since Cayman fundamentally, because of its small size, allows for a greater chance of communication between the constituent and the representative. We have to recognize today that the constituent to representative relationship would not be severed by implementing this motion, yet it would be hampered in some effects, since the relationship that this motion brings is based on the old system relationship, wherein you have to know what its life's like within your specific constituency. But as I stated, as it stands right now, Cayman is more interconnected than it is in other jurisdictions. So as to apply this law to the Cayman Islands would not be as successful as it would in other jurisdictions. Simply put, if we were to implement this motion into House today, we would be in fact creating a populist policy. It would be a policy which is based more on the popularity it brings to the mover than it does towards the practicality of actual implementation within the Cayman Islands. A motion like this, which can easily be bypassed by anyone who has multiple homes, is not a motion which is well thought out, or a motion which would be practical for the Cayman Islands as a whole. It is for that reason right now that I believe that this motion should not be passed upon this honorable House, because the possible methods in which someone can overcome this motion are numerous, and the disadvantages that it brings with causing factionalism within the Cayman Islands, and the disadvantages it brings towards severing the current relationship between constituent and representative are too severe, and that therefore this motion should not be passed upon this honorable House today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? If no other member wishes to speak, I will ask the Honorable Leader of Opposition, the elected member for Georgetown Central, to exercise his rights of reply.
Madam Speaker, the government has stated that the candidates do not have to live within the district to acknowledge the problems because they can go toward the constituency every day. But let's be realistic. Who is going to go to the constituency every single day? Madam Speaker, when the candidate goes to the constituency every day, do they see all the problems deep within life? Madam Speaker, yes, while I do understand that there have been situations where representatives have successfully represented a district where they do not reside, but these representatives have roots in that district. A good example is the Honorable Arden McLean, who represented East End while still living in Savannah, who grew up in East End, already established a bond with the East End people. I acknowledge the government for that point. And I don't know if it's me personally, but my mother taught me that every mile counts. So even though we have 22 miles, every mile counts. You go that extra mile. Globalization is taking place. As we all know, the government is striving to get the Cayman population to over 100,000 people. That's a lot. So implementing this law will help us in the better off in the future. Social media is good, I must say that. But social media is also destroying the young youth. Is the government promoting social media to destroy and corrupt the young youth? That's wrong. The government has resulted in technology to survey people, but they go to one-to-one survey. And if candidates can have a one-to-one personal reaction with the people of their district, it'll make the Cayman Islands a better place. Living in the traditional district isn't about being able to work with your colleagues. If it's about working with your colleagues, that something is very wrong. That shouldn't be a problem. If candidates want to represent the district and the people of the Cayman Islands, they must make sacrifices, whether it's moving their house, their billion-dollar house, moving their car, their family, they have to make sacrifices. And if they cannot make sacrifices, that's lazy. L-A-Z-Y, lazy. And we cannot have a lazy government representing the Cayman Islands. That's wrong. Their mindsets need to change. They need to make sacrifices. I'm not going to sit here with a lazy government. I'm hearing stuff, but I think the government should implement this law for further assistance in the Cayman Islands. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, be it now resolved that this Honorable Youth Parliament considers amending the Election Law 2017 revision to require candidates to reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent, and to mandate that the minimum number of years for a candidate to reside in that district must be 4 years prior to the date of the next general election, which he or she wished to contest. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
No.
The noes have it. Private member's motion number 2 of 2018, amendment to the, okay. I recognize the elected member, the Honorable Minister of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture, and Lands.
Madam Speaker, may I please have the division, please?
Madam Clerk, please call the division.
Honorable Richard Weber. No. Honorable Jacqueline Bonilla Williams.
No.
Honorable Carolyn Reyes.
No.
Honorable Tasmar Dawkins.
No.
Honorable Justin Ebanks.
No.
Honorable Mark Plowright.
No.
Honorable Ashley Chin.
No.
Miss Janae Whitaker.
No.
Mr. Alejandro Whitaker.
No.
Honorable Rayon Porter. Aye. Miss Dana Levy.
Aye.
Miss Aisha Bush.
Aye.
Mr. David Swan.
Aye.
Miss Zaria Truman. Can't vote on her. Miss Diamond Chambers.
Aye.
The results of the division is 5 ayes and 9 noes. Private Members Motion Number 2 of 2018, Amendment to the Education Law 2017 revision to mandate candidates reside in the traditional district which they wish to represent has failed. That concludes the proceedings of this Honorable 11th Youth Parliament. I will now call on the Honorable Premier to move a motion for the adjournment.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I move the adjournment of this Honorable 11th Youth Parliament, signed die. Madam Speaker, before you put the vote on the motion, I wish to express a vote of thanks. I want to extend my thanks towards all the youth parliamentarians who came out today in support of the motions which they have presented upon this honorable House. I want to give my thanks to all the ministers who have helped us throughout the process. I want to give specific thanks to Barbara Connolly, Ms. Zina Marin-Chin, and Mr. David Lee, who have all helped us through our drafts and proposals. And I also want to thank all of the other government ministers who helped put together this youth parliament today and all who are a part of the Cayman Islands Parliamentary Association. I also want to give specific mention of thanks towards the Attorney General who helped one of my colleagues with their speech. And I also want to give a further vote of thanks towards the education ministers and the financial ministers who helped my colleagues, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Education. And again, I want to reiterate a vote of thanks towards the youth parliamentarians who came out today, and I want to thank everyone for a good parliamentary debate today. Thank you.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of Opposition.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I also have a vote of thanks too. First off, I'd like to thank God, because through God all things is possible. Second off, I would like to thank all of the government people. They put up a strong debate today. I also want to thank every parent that showed up here today, because they're the parents that are going to put their child further in education. They're the parents that are going to make the day better. I want to thank all my opposition members, which I will name one by one: Dana Levy, Asia Bush, David Swan, Zaria Truman, and Diamond Chambers, my day one opposition members. Opposition, we go all the way, no matter what the result is. I also want to thank Daniel Roberts and Kimberly Kirkconnell for the Ministers of Education. Mr. Cart, sorry for the pronunciation, Mr. Connor, I said it right, hopefully. Praise Connor? Okay, thank you. Ms. Barbara Connolly, oh yes, Miss lovely Barbara Connolly. Mr. Alva Saku, Mr. Kenneth Bryan, he the real deal. Mr. David Wright from the Youth Parliament Committee. Miss Deborah Broderick, I'm saying it right, praise Jesus. Miss Marilyn Moxham, and the wonderful Miss Zina Chin. Without her, this wouldn't be possible. So give it up, Miss Zina Chin. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night, a day. I'd also like to thank the clerk, Miss Shanti, and the wonderful speaker, Miss Destiny.
Thank you. The motion is that this Honorable 11th Youth Parliament do stand adjourned, side and aye. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. This Honorable 11th Youth Parliament now stands adjourned, side and aye.